Hello and welcome to our show. We're coming to you from the law firm of Burke Costanza Carberry LLP here in Maryville, Indiana. And with us today is Alfredo Estrada. He is co-chair of the firm's Immigration Practice Group and a member of the firm's Litigation and Business Practice Groups. Alfredo's practice involves representing municipal and government entities, immigration, and civil litigation in both state and federal courts. Alfredo is admitted to the practice of law in the Indiana United States Court of Appeals, 7th Court, in the United States District Court for the Northern District, in the United States District Court for the Southern District, and the United States Immigration Court. Alfredo is a former steelworker and a lifelong resident of Northwest Indiana. He earned his undergraduate degree in political science from Purdue University, Calumet. Alfredo earned his law degree from Valparaiso University Law School. While at Valparaiso School of Law, he was a member of the Honors Division, full tuition scholarship recipient, and graduated magna cum laude. Congratulations on that.
Appreciate it.
Amazing. So welcome to our show. The important step is what brought you to practice law. Why don't we talk about some more of the details that I didn't discuss in your bio.
So prior to me becoming a lawyer, I was a crayman at U.S. Steel, East Chicagotown, Local 5133. And during one of the slowdowns, I went back to get my degree at Purdue Calumet. And the union had a negotiated term within the CBA that there was tuition reimbursement for those who took advantage of it. So I took advantage of it and earned my degree, and then thought afterwards, when I graduated, what profession would allow me to have the most influence on issues or things that I was interested in. And after thinking about it quite a bit, the legal profession was it for me. So that's why I'm practicing law here today. So I think first we got to give some context of immigration law generally, and the last time there was any type of comprehensive immigration reform was in 2001. And obviously the world has changed, the United States has changed, the importing countries since then have changed, and it's a general one-size-fits-all immigration bill or comprehensive immigration policy for each and every country. And since the administration's change here to the Trump administration, undoubtedly he's enacted policy that's changed the way immigration is practiced and how the policy affects immigrants, whether documented or undocumented. And as stated that he plans on changing it more if he can. And what he's done is not done it through passing bills and working with Congress, but through executive order. So the first one he enacted when he came into office was, or not one of the first ones, was in September, right after he got in, was to withdraw the DACA status from individuals, which
that's
was
prior to these.
That's prior to those. So, and then since then has enacted other ones, what's been coined as the Muslim ban, and then Muslim ban 1, 2, and 3. So now he's at border security, building the wall, and others. And undoubtedly, we could talk about whether our nation's border should be secure and how do we fund that, and whether it's through a wall, other technology, or a port of entries like Chicago Airport. Any international airport is a port of entry where immigrants come in, either tourists or green card holders or whatever. Those need to be secure as well. But there's other ways, I believe, to give context or to develop a comprehensive immigration policy that takes out the executive's hands, and that's what we're doing. We're having a conversation in the new administration of enacting executive orders and then individuals suing him and the courts getting involved. But it leaves out really the major player in policy, and that's Congress. So those are multiple executive orders that he's passed, and we could talk quite a bit on them. But I think what we need to do to address the outdated immigration policy is really for Congress to pass something. and it would eliminate the use of executive order to govern immigration policy.
Because really, from what I understand, even since 2001, there needs to be some changes, obviously, to make the system more fair and more secure. Because again, after 9/11, our big concern is, gosh, are we scanning people appropriately? And we had people that come into our country that actually caused us harm. That's understandable, undebatable. However, to act on a broad stroke that affects people that are totally innocent is of concern. And again, where people like you come in and try to defend these people's rights. And
yeah, so DACA wasn't what it was is the Obama administration recognizing that these individuals were here for a long period of time. The U.S. is the only country that they know. They have no ties to their foreign country. And that they've been educated here in the United States. It's a requirement that they have either in school or pursuing a degree or pursuing high school diploma, no criminal record. So they should get some type of status, even if it's a quasi-status, in order for them to remain here.
Many of these people, obviously want to become citizens.
Absolutely,
and stay here,
absolutely.
Right?
And they're
That's
citizens in all other ways except having that document.
Exactly.
So what that was in the process and enacted, and a lot of people came out the woodwork and said, "Hey, I'm going to apply for this. I qualify," and now they're out over, quite a lot. And then the executive order just rescinded it, and now it's at the Supreme Court. Just maybe a week and a half ago, they heard whether the administration originally under Obama had the authority to enact DACA the way it did, and there's responses. So right now we're at a stance where it's up to the Supreme Court to decide whether that executive order was properly executed because of the executive's power, rather than what should have occurred was Congress passing a DREAM Act, something very similar to codify or have statute that allows individuals in that position to gain that pathway to citizenship. So that's where that stands. Recent polls show 80% of Americans support something like that. And that's just one piece of what would be a comprehensive immigration bill, just addressing one type of individual through that. So, and then, if we go further down the executive orders, there's been many, but the changed immigration, if you remember, there was the child separation issue at the border where they started, it's just a policy shift, whether they start prosecuting parents for illegal entry under Section 1325, right, where it's a misdemeanor to cross the border undocumented. And because of that criminal prosecution, if they were with kids, the families were separated. Where the policy was before, we don't charge that minor misdemeanor. We allow the family in to claim asylum and go through that process. There was a big uptick and uproar on that, kids being detained, families separated, and then really whether they kept track of those individuals during that process to reunite. And we've had clients here in this office who went through that process and luckily were reunited. And allegedly they stopped doing that, but really they haven't. Families are still being detained. So those are, I think, the two major ones within his presidency that he's kind of...
Yeah, let's just back up just a bit here. So there's been a lot of discussion about this between the Obama administration and the Trump administration. So just to clarify it again, under Obama administration, immigrants came in and they may have been charged with misdemeanor or so on. What is the difference, again, between that and now under the new Trump policies and executive actions?
So it was, under Obama administration, they did not prosecute for the misdemeanors. They kept the families together and allowed them to pursue asylum. Right. Although it was a criminal, it's a misdemeanor under the statute. But they used their prosecutorial discretion not to prosecute, deciding that families should stay together.
Question: did anything ever show up on their records, or were they expunged after they were charged?
Recently?
No, back then, during an Obama administration.
No, so the way it works is when an undocumented person enters the United States and they're apprehended by Border Patrol, it's whether there's communication between the U.S. District Prosecutor in that region communicating with Border Patrol and Border Patrol referring those individuals for prosecution.
Okay.
So if they went through that process, they're most likely going to plead to the misdemeanor and then release. So it would be on their record. Yeah.
All right. So fast forward now under the Trump administration. What you're saying is if they get charged with a misdemeanor, then there's purpose to separate the families under the new Trump administration executive order.
Yeah, that's because when the parent is arrested and charged, she's placed in a detention facility for adults, and now there's no adult or parent to take custody of the kids, so it causes the separation. And then the kids are housed in their detention center, awaiting either release, another family member in the United States to work with ORR, the Office of Refugee Resettlement, to take custody of them, or reunification with the parent.
All right. So Trump administration can claim, well, it's not a meaningful separation. It's just they're getting charged, and they're putting in, again, playing the devil's advocate here.
Sure.
So, but that is the main difference between the.
Whereas that particular topic.
Right. Oh yeah. Let's talk about it from your perspective now that we have been dealt this hand of cards, and how do you deal with it as an attorney? Obviously, you have people coming to you asking you for help, because they're, they meant to establish some life here, whether it's long term or not. It's probably different in every case, but they come to you, and where do you come in?
So they generally come here because of some life-changing event, right? X happened, so now they need the attorney, or they see what's going on with the rhetoric and say, hey, now's the time that I need to address this issue. And under the current immigration policy, there are laws that allow for someone who entered the United States undocumented to cure that and begin the process to citizenship, and that's where I play the role. So generally, the general hypothetical is someone who's undocumented and is now married to a U.S. citizen, and we could petition for the immigrant to get a green card and go through consular processing through their home country if they could show extreme hardship to the U.S. citizen spouse through a waiver for that inadmissibility. That's the stereotypical process here that comes. There's other ways, U visas for victims of crime and help the police in prosecution of that crime. VAWA, individuals who are married to U.S. citizen spouses and are victims of domestic violence, and other ways. There's a long list of ways we could get undocumented to citizenship. And that's really one of the truths I want to get out there, is that just because you're undocumented doesn't mean there's no pathway. Actually, the INA recognizes that individuals cross illegally and provides for cures of that. And that one person can come here undocumented and end up a U.S. citizen within a matter of years. So that's generally the process. That my practice would be family immigration, humanitarian immigration, asylum, and removal defense.
Right. And so I see one of the orders asks for 10,000 additional ICE agents. And so, I mean, what is that process? What does it look like?
So ICE is the police force of the Department of Homeland Security, right? They're the ones who enforce immigration laws. So if they have someone on their radar that is a violation and removable, they're tasked with finding that person, arresting them, and placing them within removal proceedings. So it will look like the stereotypical one: they raid a restaurant, and they will have an arrest warrant due to the immigration violation, which is a civil violation. It's not criminal. And then that person would be detained in, there's 4 facilities in Illinois or 1 in Wisconsin, awaiting a bond hearing and the immigration process to begin. So even if they're arrested, placed in detention, we could file a motion for bond and show that he's not a safety risk, or she is not a flight risk. And they set a bond amount for those individuals, and then get released and given a date to come back to court to begin the removal proceedings. Even within that proceedings, so individuals here illegally, there is a way to a green card within removal proceedings. If they have over 10 years physical presence and a U.S. citizen spouse, child, or parent, or green card holding spouse, child, or parent. We can cancel removal if we could show extreme and unusual hardship to those U.S. citizen individuals. So stereotypically, U.S. citizen spouse has major health issues, relies on the immigrant for sole financial resources, kids are sick, various reasons, right? We can go from arrested, bonded, all undocumented to green card holding within a matter of 2 or 3 years. And there's still asylum claims, withholding claims, and defenses under the Convention Against Torture as well.
Right. Are you able to use that? And how difficult is that to prove?
It is difficult, and that's going to be if there is a threat to their safety or life or persecution back home due to race, religion, national origin, or political opinion, or if they're a member of a particular social group. If it fits within there, they qualify for asylum or withholding or removal. Asylum has to be filed within 1 year of their physical presence here in the United States, or have some type of unusual circumstances that cause them not to file it. If they don't qualify, then it turns into a removal of cancellation, or a Convention Against Torture Act, where we have to show the government is unable, or there's acquiescence to the torture or the persecution. So there's still defenses, but it's very difficult. You got to think you're talking to individuals who are not really sophisticated, didn't think this would ever happen, haven't been to their country in a while, and need police reports, need affidavits, need doctor examinations and psych examinations. So the level and the hardship to prove that, especially under the new case law and under the new administration, it's a high standard. Right. Very high standard.
And now, also part of the executive orders was a way of slowing down immigration by saying before you can file for asylum in the United States, you have to first of all file in another country and prove that they are not, there's no way of you getting asylum there. So what is that? I mean, you probably don't see a lot of that because it's just slowing down immigration, right?
Yeah, and so one, there was a slowdown in immigration before the Trump administration. It's been on a decline, but that executive order, which is being challenged in courts now, is really what they want to see is individuals from Central America apply for a green card or asylum here in Mexico, and where the Mexican residents or citizens apply for, it's nowhere, right? Because there's nowhere they travel through to get here. You would think it would cause a slowdown in individuals coming to the southern border, but what I think that policy doesn't do is recognize what they're fleeing. And when you're fleeing something to the level where you're going to die, or if you stay or you come to the United States, that push is so great you're still coming. And what you're going to see in results of that is not individuals coming and presenting themselves to border officials saying, I claim asylum. You see individuals not doing that, but trying to sneak into the country illegally, an uptick of illegal immigration. So that's really what it is incentivizing. Right. It's saying if you present yourself and you didn't apply for it in another country, you're not going to get asylum here. So what do I do as an individual? I stay home and risk persecution, or I try to sneak without getting caught.
Right. And again, all these policies, we spoke to that, have been enacted without the use of Congress.
Official branch in response to suits against this executive orders. So we do need a discussion by Congress on comprehensive immigration reform.
Right, and that where it's meaningfully discussed, and it may take some time, but it will be meaningfully discussed by people that we elected in those seats. And so that's along lines here, because you had made some statements about what you felt would be an ideal model for reform. And one is a pathway to citizenship for dreamers. Undeniable. Updating the Life Act 245, which enables certain individuals who are physically present in the United States to pay a penalty and adjust status in the United States. you want to talk about that a bit?
Yeah, that's a real interesting one because the Republican administration first passed that under George H. Bush. And what that allows is for an individual who has someone who petitioned for them prior to 2001, April 31st of 2001, that petition, in order to stay here in the United States, pay a $1,000 penalty, and just, if you're living in the region in Chicago, adjust your status from undocumented to green card. So it's a penalty. So I think that's why I got bipartisan support. Hey, we're recognizing we want to keep families together. We want individuals who are here to get legal status, but they got to be penalized somehow. So it's a monetary penalty. It's the simplest way.
Right.
And so my thought is, and then it was 97 was originally passed, 2001 under the Clinton administration when it was renewed. So first date was 97, 2001. And what it recognizes that there are undocumented here. They have U.S. citizen families. So that 2001 date, in my thought, should be updated 2015, 2017. Who knows would be a logical date, but it's still, the reasons for that are still here. Undocumented are here. They've been here for a while. If they don't have a criminal history in the other admissibilities, assess them a penalty and get them out the woodwork. Let those U.S. citizen families be better prepared to be in the communities.
Right, and another one that the point that you made, a transfer of the current immigration courts from the Department of Justice, where they reside now, to a separate Article 1 immigration court with a trial and appellate division, which is a repeal of the USC 1325, thus ending the family separation and detention of children.
Those are two separate issues.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so the Article 1 immigration court issue, right now it's held under the Department of Justice, and the Supreme Court of those courts is the Attorney General. So he could take a case and issue an order on how this court should have ruled, and then immigration laws changed. What I think right now, immigration courts, for example, in Chicago, if I have a case tomorrow, I'm going to be there, I'm going to ask a date for a trial, I won't get one until 2023. Okay, that's how big the backlog is in Chicago Immigration Court, and it's nationwide. And the reason is, they restricted judicial independence within there. Generally, you go into court and you say, Your Honor, I want to continue this. I have an application with USCIS. If that was the case, and that could remedy this. You could take it off your docket. You won't have to hear this if this application is heard. I just need you to terminate. Okay, that makes sense, right? Immigration judges don't have that discretion. They have to keep it in, keep the backlog because of the priorities given by the administration to deport or to remove individuals. So I think if it's moved to Article 1, then they have that judicial independence to manage their dockets, right? There could be a status docket, continuance is granted for individuals to kind of, I would say, if we're in the civil realm or civil litigation realm, settle the case, right? You have a green card, therefore the removal proceedings is moved. So that will cause that. And then that takes the appellate court away from the Board of Immigration Appeals and the Attorney General, but another immigration court specifically for immigration. We see it in bankruptcy. We see it in
specific court.
Tax courts, right? We have that. And the backlog within immigration court really calls for this to occur.
So basically, put this in simple terms, this would take a specific issue out of the larger DOJ court system and make it its own system.
Yeah.
So further defining and be able to focus in on these issues.
Yeah, and move cases along. If the idea is to get individuals who are not allowed to be in the country out of the country or removed to their home countries, or for them to apply for defenses or seek relief outside of immigration court, the current system's so backlogged because of the way it is, we have to find another way to do that.
So it seems to me that that'd be the most effective way in handling a lot of these issues, because we're people sitting around, whether they be detained or waiting to hear their case because of the backlog. Yeah, makes sense to me. Then strengthening and funding security of our borders and ports of entry in a humane way.
Yeah, so I spent a week down in Dilley, Texas at the Southwest Family Immigration Detention Center, providing pro bono legal assistance to women and children who presented themselves at the border for asylum. And they were housed at that specific facility. And while they were housed awaiting a credible fear interview, I provided them legal assistance to pass their credible fear interview. That's the first step to asylum. Pass your credible fear interview, and then you're released and given a date to go to court for your asylum claim. And there I got to see on the front lines of the southern border, new arrivals, hear stories, for the first time told by these individuals, right? They've never told anybody what happened to them, and it's there. And I got to say, the facility was clean. Kids were taken care of. There's school abilities there for these women and children. And I've seen individuals or women and kids, being 4 months old up until the age of 15, 16, 17, they're housed. And undoubtedly, I state that because I've seen the front lines, southern Texas border, southern Texas facilities where these asylum seekers are housed, and recognize that securement of our borders and port of entries is an issue. But there's a different discussion to be had on that and everything else we talked about. There's individuals here already who are immigrants that we need to address, undoubtedly, and how do we do that under immigration reform, or whether the laws enacted already address them, and then funding for security. And I think I mentioned both because the rhetoric is crossed on each issue. We talk about border security and then blame people here already. And how do we talk and have a good discussion on immigration reform if we're not true in the two issues, and we need to separate them. And there's ways to do it, and we can have a disagreement on that. And then, I'm not a politician. It's just addressing an accurate and comprehensive immigration reform for individuals who are here or are seeking asylum is a different discussion than walls or metal detectors or drones or anything like that.
Yeah.
And safety.
One of the other things that happened through some of the executive orders is the impact on sanctuary cities. Now that their grant money will be withheld, presence of ICE in these sanctuary cities now acting more aggressively to find undocumented. So what can a sanctuary city do legally, and what is illegal for them to do?
So that's really, there's a specific U.S. code that addresses sanctuary cities, and it talks about communication and cooperation with municipalities and any federal agency. So there's uptick in these sanctuary city ordinances in California, Chicago, and passing saying, if you're here, we do not cooperate. And then there was that threat by the administration. We're taking grant money to fund your police, security, all this. So what they did was create a welcome city ordinance that was funneled around the country, in which I was able to advocate for in the city of Gary here and the city of East Chicago for them to pass. The little nuance here in Indiana is that there's an Indiana code that kind of reaffirms the federal code in Indiana and allows anyone in the state of Indiana to sue a municipality that they feel bridges that state code. And it's cooperation and communication with ICE or any other federal agency. But with these sanctuary cities under the federal statute and this Indiana statute and the welcome city ordinance that I was able to kind of edit and draft for the Indiana cities, is that, okay, if there's documents and you want to protect your residents and you say, hey, give me this information, and if there's no need to know a social security number or the lack thereof or their current immigration status for a municipal benefit, water, business permits, things like that, library cards, if you're keeping that and there's no need for it or requirement by law, let's not keep it. Because when ICE comes in, the federal agency comes in and says, give me these documents, there's nothing to turn over. There's, hey, here it is, but the information they're looking for is not there because we're not required to keep it and we don't ask for it, therefore our residents are not turned over to ICE. So that's a little nuance that we drafted around the state code in order to comply with it and still cooperate with ICE.
Right.
And there's other issues, hey, there's 10th Amendment issues, like whether the federal government could come out and co-opt your police force to enforce an ICE raid, and whether cities want that. So within the welcome city ordinance, we say to the best ability they can. If we have 8 police officers on duty, are we going to have them leave their districts they're patrolling to enforce a civil violation enforcement? Meaning this guy's been here 20 years, there's no criminal record, but he's deportable. Do we leave District 6 in Gary alone unpoliced in order to help ICE? Right? And that's a determination the city should best make, not the federal agency nor the state of Indiana. So it's really the city trying to enforce their 10th Amendment rights that the federal government, the state government can't commandeer their police force in order to exercise federal law. The issue's been litigated, and is being litigated. East Chicago's is in federal court, and Gary's is in state court, all being litigated on whether it violates the state code or the federal statute. That being said, the whole thought is that really residents of a municipality are residents of a municipality. You want those individuals to be safe, and you don't want to increase a police force with guns being drawn, things of that, in your neighborhoods for civil violations. You could simply drop off a letter to the individual and say, report to court on this date for your immigration violation, and get them to court. There's no need to raid. So that's the whole policy behind Welcome City. And of course, there's a backlash, and that's fine. So the short answer to your question, what can cities do, sanctuary cities, welcome cities do, that's being debated and sued upon and litigated.
And I guess to make it in my simple mind, which I've got a very simple mind, yeah, and this is a dilemma whenever you create a city or a municipality ordinance and you have an underlying state statute trying to make sure it's like a game of Tetris. Because what you could be setting up, if that is not well thought of ordinance.
Yeah, so the issue, like the technical term and the legal term is called preemption.
Yeah.
Whether the state preempted this topic as to ordinances on immigration or communication between the federal agencies. Non-for-profit organization out of Georgetown University Law School that is defending the East Chicago ordinance and the Gary ordinance pro bono because it would be a major hit to the bottom line of those cities to defend them.
Oh, really? Yeah. Legal fees to defend those ordinances. But it's, the city's trying to do the right thing for its citizenship.
Yeah.
And so how can you argue that? But it's a complex issue. It's
Absolutely.
by no means black and white.
Absolutely. And there was great debate at the city council meeting, at the East Chicago council meeting on whether it was best for the city. And East Chicago passed it unanimously, signed by the mayor. And we got great support by the mayor and Gary and the city council and Gary as well. And it's going to be a great issue, and it's very local versus state power, and it's a constitutional issue. It's not just an immigration issue. I think my whole point of always getting out and talking about immigration is that we have truth out there. We have to expand the knowledge of everybody on what immigration is, that it's an American issue, that it's a local issue. It's an issue that it touches everybody's lives. And my wife was in social work for 14 years, and she always put it this way. Regardless of the status of the kid who's in your kid's classroom, if they're hungry, if they're scared, the parent's being deported, if they have issue, that affects your kid's daily life. They're not going to be able to learn because of that distraction. Your communities are touched because of that. So what I would like always to leave people with is that immigration is a local issue, it's a community issue, it's a national issue, and it's also touches Americans who are here, born here, as much as it does undocumented. So that's what I always try to get out.
Yeah, and you're so right. I mean, any impact, specifically the school is an excellent model, any impact by one student impacts that entire building.
Absolutely.
And we know that. But it doesn't take away from us the responsibility when we house people here. It has to be done in a humane fashion. And, we hope that's being done elsewhere. But it seems to me when we have a separation of the children from the adult that brings with them, it puts a heavy load on the administration in that camp area to provide services. It mentally impacts those kids. Those kids are never going to be the same. I don't care what the debate is.
Yeah.
They say the kids are durable now. I mean, that's going to be with them for their entire life.
And that affects, the same effect is in when there's families separated in our communities. So a family that's dad's undocumented, kids are U.S. citizens, if he's deported, where do those kids turn to? They turn to local communities and municipalities like township for poor relief, the state for medical benefits. It's a strain on our economy to deport individuals if there's a U.S. citizen family. Those individuals lose their financial resources. So it goes throughout, not just at the border. It affects Valpo, Gary, East Chicago, Hobart, just as much as it does down at the border.
Yeah, every community.
Yep.
Boy, I hope we get this solved.
Yeah, let's try it.
Yeah, we do. Well, with that, we appreciate you coming on our show and really very informative discussion, and I hope that's been meaningful to our listeners, and hope to have you on
I
again.
appreciate you having me. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Bill. Yep.